politicized. Politicized perhaps, and aware, but not actively working on these issues. Said something to me, and it was something that I dug in further, and ended up later on in my work, reaching out to the campaign and reaching out to the family, and I had the opportunity to work with them. This is the case of Dr. Afia Siddiqui. Dr. Afia, and I've mentioned her name in the last 2 nights, but this case is one that requires looking into the details. This is one of those cases, and I use this last, even though it's the chronological order with Tarek Mohammed is fluid. Because this is one of those cases which I really believe the government prosecuted only because they could, to prove a point. The accusation was, actually let me start with our accusations, because I think that's even more important. The crimes committed against her are much more serious than anything she's even been accused of. And in 2003, she was in Pakistan and disappeared. The government claimed that someone named her as some courier for terror, something like this, and she disappears. No record of where she's held. 5 years later, sorry? And 3 children. That's right, exactly. 2 children, only 2 of the children were returned. But the 3rd child that she had, which disappeared, is still not found. And one of the children turned up years later at his sister's house, I believe, speaking American accented English. And she pops up now 5 years later in Afghanistan, in a daze, apparently, like stunned, visibly out of place, just really out of it. And she's arrested. She doesn't even make it a block. And she's arrested by American soldiers, or by the American occupation force, with some backpack, and they say that in this backpack there's some plans for a bomb, and chemical containers and this and that, and a map of New York, or something like this. Let's tie it all together, right? Nice little package. And as she's being held now in Afghanistan by the American military police, the story goes, now this is the American government story, is that she was chained up, and somehow she gets a hold of a rifle, like one of the Americans' rifles, and somehow shoots at these soldiers, misses all of them, obviously, and then in self-defense, the Americans one of them shoot her in the torso, I believe it was. She was injured. And on this charge of attempted murder of these American occupation troops, essentially, she is flown back to New York and tried in this great big show trial. I think it was the New York Post had this big headline on the front, Lady Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's not how you say Al-Qaeda, but it sounds better if you kind of rhyme, an internal rhyme. This big show trial, and finally she's convicted. She denies all charges, of course, and she's convicted, finally sentenced to 86 years. For attempted murder. When she was the only one harmed, in this case, and literally it seems so physically impossible for even this to occur. Yeah.
Also, what's the bomb plans that they found in the backpack, and all of that, they never brought any charges based on any of that.
That's a good point, actually. I didn't even think about that. You heard that? These plans, these alleged plans for the bomb, and there have been other people who have been convicted, who have been charged and convicted on cases less than this, with much less information than an actual bomb plan and this and that, and so-called chemicals, whatever it was. And absolutely right, Carrie's right, that they never charged her, with any such crime, which makes the whole thing, of course, look that much more suspicious. After the fact, there are reports that there are other prisoners held in American black sites in Afghanistan that put her in other prisons. In Bagram Air Base, I think, was the one that people thought that she was there. Please, yeah, absolutely. I could translate for you.
Yeah, the case I was talking about, Muslim, the woman in the cell, people identified that woman as the she was being tortured. That's where we found out about her. She was called the Great Lady.
Right. I didn't realize that was Muslim.
He was the one who first found her, but we didn't put it was her.
Man. The brother was mentioning the case of Mazin Beg and the lady in the cell.
The lady screaming.
Oh, the lady screaming.
Yes.
And this was, it's suspected that this was Dr. Afia Siddiqui, that she was tortured, that she was raped, by Americans while in their detention in these black sites in the military base there.
It was in the 5 years that she was
Disappeared, right, that she was exactly unaccounted for. I didn't actually know that connection. That's disgusting. I think the case explains itself. And I like to reiterate, that this case stands as one of, not just a shame, of course, on the American government in the whole last 20 years, and you could argue the whole settler colonial history of America is a big shame on the institution itself. But it's also, and I'll say, many American Muslim leaders feel the same, that this is a shame on us, that we've been unable really to rally mass movement to free her. And such is the level of, it's not even apathy. I can't say that. I can't say it's apathy. But such is the level of fear, such is the level of internalized Islamophobia and bigotry that many Muslims in America have, that we've been unable really to organize, to put serious pressure on the American government to free her. Once in a while, pressure comes from Pakistan. Once in a while, a group overseas will kidnap a soldier. Not kidnap, that's not fair, because the soldiers aren't on their own land. They arrest them. They arrest American soldiers. Let me not buy into this nonsense either. They'll arrest an American soldier someplace and try to trade them for a group including Afia, and it's just always falling through. And I say that, and I include that, we're not here in America, I want to share that to caution all of us, understanding that a generational link is needed. And this is true for the Islamic struggle, and this is true, I understand, from our hosts, this is needed in the Irish struggle as well. That we need to make sure that we are, for the youth here, that we are educating ourselves and others and connecting with these struggles and making ourselves part of it, making ourselves useful in it. And for my esteemed elders here as well, that we're doing that. That we're doing that work, and that we're making those connections, that we're organizing. Because these people, these are lives, these are families. And the oppression, as Dermot was saying, it's bad enough that they're in prison innocent. But what they do to them when they're in is almost even more shocking than the imprisonment itself. The conditions that we hear about in the prison that Dr. Afia is in Texas, FMC Carswell, I think it's called, it's shocking. Like in the last decade, I think about 100 women have just mysteriously died. Just
suicide rates.
And they say it's suicide, yeah.
The suicide rates, confirmed suicide rates are 10 times higher than any other prison in America.
Right. And the theory is from her campaign that basically they're just trying to get her to kill herself. Even the last appeal, she really gave the court a vote of no confidence. Her heart wasn't in it anymore. She didn't recognize the court, the legitimacy of the court to even hear her appeal. Her family members were trying to contact them, trying to send letters and calls, and they weren't hearing anything back, and they were shocked by that because they knew that she would always want to hear from her family. Finally, someone got through to visit, and she said, "No one's called me. No one sent any letters," meaning that even the prison administration itself is keeping her from communication that's coming in her support. All the letter writing campaigns, the postcard campaigns that people have led, trying to get correspondence with her to let her know that people are thinking about her, that people care, that people are ready to stand up to support. They shut this down as well. And this is part of the oppression of the prison system as well. CMUs, the communication management units, I forget what you guys call them in the UK, but these are basically solitary confinement for everybody. We have CMUs in Colorado and a couple states in the United States that are huge percentages of which are Muslims. Huge percentage of Muslims, 23 and a half hours a day in solitary confinement. That half hour isn't much of a social time either. You're still in a cage where visits are extremely limited, where correspondence is extremely limited. You can't really have much of anything. Many of these guys aren't allowed congregational prayers even. That was a battle just to get that for some. working with the families. We have family conferences in the United States where NCPCF is the organization where they gather families of these prisoners together to try to provide support, to provide services to them directly, and to also train them and prepare them to advocate for themselves, to be the leaders of this movement that we need. When they talk about it, apparently the guys inside know because they're all in the same wing. They're all in the same prison, so when they are at least within earshot of each other, they're all talking, they're all happy that their families are finally meeting on the outside, and it's a very strange brotherhood that's formed around this, but this is going to be the core, as my colleagues have mentioned, this is going to be the core of the movement moving forward. Anyway, I'll wrap up there. These were 3 cases, and there's so many others. Hundreds, literally hundreds of cases. At last count, maybe 2 years ago, I guess was the last count, over 500 cases, 500 to 600 cases in the United States alone, which were very clearly political prosecution, and there's plenty of other cases which are the result of mass surveillance and of police harassing people and provoking, but 500 at least plus cases where Muslims in America were either framed or entrapped, essentially. And this continues. It's gotten worse. The Fort Dix 5, great family, great brothers from New Jersey, who were just framed. Not even an entrapment case, they were just framed. Just an informant came along and put words in their mouths. That's all it was, that's all it took to send 5 men away for life. Young men, with young families. The Newburgh 4, where an informant takes advantage of people really in desperate poverty. And even these guys thought that they were playing the informant. They thought they were going to be able to take his money without actually doing anything that he asked them to do. The guy was telling them that he was Al-Qaeda or something like this, and they didn't even believe him. They just thought, okay, if he's got cash, then we'll take it and run. But of course, they didn't even get that far, and the FBI swoops in and arrests them all before any buttons get pressed, and now they're also looking at 25 years, I think was the minimum sentence that they all received, at least that. People with mental and emotional disabilities, people like Ahmed Farhani, people like Siraj Mateen, guys who literally an informant was taking them by the hand, convincing them to play even minor roles, in some, not even plots usually. Like Ahmed Farhani, this informant finally, after convincing him to drop out of college, after convincing him to his work, and was just giving him money and giving him drugs and alcohol, and finally convinces him to come buy a gun with him. And the guy goes to buy a gun. He thinks he's buying the gun. And the guy says, "Oh, you bought a gun? We have a special deal today. Here, take a grenade for free with that gun." And so now they have him not just on a gun, not just on a handgun, but on an explosives charge. And it's such a joke. The Newburgh case, which I just mentioned, it was way upstate, where they had to find these guys to pull them down. They convinced them to participate in the plot to blow up a synagogue in the Bronx. So that way the New York City Police Department gets some federal funding out of all this too. And the Jewish community also got a lot of good federal funding to protect their synagogues from this growing Islamic threat. I don't know much about that one. But the citizenship is relevant. The brother Abu Amana, who had his citizenship stripped.
Yes, yes.
Huh?
He's tweeting about
Mahdi Hashim.
Oh, okay, I misread. Okay, that case, yeah. My brother literally had his citizenship stripped by the United Kingdom. This is something that France has passed law for this, and this is something that even in the U.S. discussions are starting about how do you take citizenship away from people for certain crimes. Extradited to the U.S. and given now just 9 years. Was that correct? 9 years in prison. It's not light 9 years. These cases, these are tests for us. These are an opportunity for us, of course, to test our ethics and to prove ourselves. We know that this world is a test. But I really hope that we will meet the challenge. I really hope that we can build alliance, that we can organize, connect struggles in all lands and in all places, people of all faiths, that we develop a vision which is based on principles of human rights. That's my hope, that's my pledge. I'm honored to share this space and struggle with you all. and I hope that we will be useful in it. To the people of Ireland, we are at your service, literally, we are at your service. We're here and we'll be here whenever we're needed. The struggle continues and we know it. As Nadia said, none of us are free until all are free. So I end on that. I really want to thank you for your time, and I hope that you'll have good questions and comments. And we'll continue this discussion and this struggle altogether. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Cyrus. Very important. So we're going to open up the session to question and answer, where you can propose a question to a specific speaker or essentially ask a question, and the panelists that feel like they can contribute can do so. So the session is going to only last 15 minutes because we haven't got much time. Any questions? Yeah?
I'm sorry, it's two folks here. I'm just wondering how long your father was convicted for. He got 4 life sentences. 4 life sentences. And during this trial, did they have recordings of conversations and videos and surveillance? Just make a point. There was a case where I come from of the W3. We had a very similar case to your father. He was on surveillance for over 3 years with her, 3 men from Lurgan. And during their trial,